On a sweltering July night in 1937, the city of Beijing lay restless under a heavy, humid sky. The air was thick, carrying the distant sounds of life winding down, unaware of the storm about to break. The ancient Marco Polo Bridge, a silent witness to centuries of history, stood just outside the city. That night, it became the spark for a war that would reshape not only China, but the entire Asian continent. Japanese troops, stationed nearby under the pretense of military exercises, suddenly claimed that one of their soldiers had gone missing. Using this as justification, they demanded entry into the walled Chinese town of Wanping to search for him. The Chinese commander, aware of the tension simmering for months, refused the demand. He drew a line, one that neither side was willing to cross, but neither would back down from. Suddenly, shots rang out in the darkness. To this day, no one knows who fired first. But in that instant, confusion and panic erupted, and the fragile peace shattered. What began as a small, almost accidental skirmish quickly spiraled out of control. The fighting intensified, drawing in more troops and spreading fear through the countryside. The Japanese military seized the moment, launching a full-scale invasion with overwhelming force. Their columns advanced rapidly, determined to crush resistance before it could organize. For the people of Wanping, the sudden eruption of gunfire shattered any sense of safety. Families huddled together in fear, uncertain of what the next hour would bring. The Marco Polo Bridge incident marked the point of no return. It was the spark that ignited a full-blown war between China and Japan. Within weeks, Japanese forces swept across northern China, capturing city after city. They expected a swift victory, confident in their military superiority. But the Chinese, though fractured and battered by years of internal strife, refused to collapse. Soldiers and civilians alike rallied to defend their homeland, forming new lines of resistance. The war that began that night would last 8 long, brutal years. It would test the limits of human endurance as cities were destroyed and millions were displaced. It would become one of the deadliest and most devastating conflicts of World War II, leaving scars that would last for generations. Yet, from the ashes of destruction, a new spirit was forged. The struggle that started on that bridge would ultimately give rise to a fiercely independent China, determined to shape its own destiny. The world would never be the same. The events of that July night sent shockwaves across the globe, forever altering the course of history. When we think of World War II, we picture Europe, Normandy, Stalingrad, London under the Blitz. But in Asia, the Second Sino-Japanese War was already raging, shaping the world we know today. For China, this was the defining trauma of the 20th century. The war forced a divided nation to unite, forging a new sense of identity and resilience. Its legacy explains China's fierce commitment to sovereignty and strength. The conflict set the stage for the communist victory and the founding of the People's Republic. With over 20 million casualties, the war's scars run deep. Remembering this war is essential to understanding modern China and our global story. To truly understand the roots of Japan's invasion, we must first look back at China's so-called century of humiliation, a period marked by foreign domination, internal strife, and national despair. The once mighty Qing dynasty, which had ruled for centuries, gradually crumbled under relentless foreign pressure and mounting internal chaos. Its authority weakened, and its people suffered. Humiliating defeats in the Opium Wars, followed by a series of unequal treaties, left China divided, impoverished, and weak. Foreign powers carved out spheres of influence, exploiting China's resources and people. After the Qing fell, chaos reigned. Civil wars erupted, and warlords carved up the land, each ruling their own territories. The country was fractured, with no strong central government to unite the people. Amid this turmoil, two main political forces emerged: Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists. Both claimed to represent China's future, but their visions were starkly different. Their uneasy alliance was short-lived. Distrust and ambition soon led to open conflict, plunging the nation into a brutal civil war that devastated cities and villages alike. Meanwhile, across the sea, Japan had rapidly modernized and grown ambitious. Its leaders saw opportunity in China's weakness and eyed its vast resources with growing hunger. In 1931, Japan seized its chance, invading Manchuria and establishing the puppet state of Manchukuo. This bold move shocked the world. The world's response was swift in words, but weak in action. The League of Nations condemned Japan's aggression, but no real consequences followed. International outrage faded quickly. Japan learned it could act with impunity. China's vulnerability was on full display, and the world's inaction only emboldened Japanese ambitions. By 1937, the stage was set for a full-scale invasion. Tensions mounted as armies massed along the borders, and the world watched anxiously. Soon, the world would witness the devastating consequences. Millions displaced, cities in ruins, and a nation brought to its knees by war and suffering. After Marco Polo Bridge, Japan targeted Shanghai, China's largest city. The Battle of Shanghai was a brutal 3-month urban war. Chinese forces fought valiantly but were overwhelmed by Japanese firepower. The world watched as Shanghai burned, but help never came. When Shanghai fell, Japan advanced to Nanjing, the capital. In December 1937, Nanjing fell, and horror followed. The Nanjing massacre saw tens of thousands murdered and countless women assaulted. Amid the terror, a handful of foreigners created a safety zone, saving hundreds of thousands. Their courage stood out against unimaginable evil. The world could no longer ignore the brutality of the conflict. With Nanjing lost, the nationalist government retreated deep inland to Chongqing. Millions fled with them, creating a nation divided. Free China in the west, occupied China in the east. In occupied zones, Japanese rule was harsh and exploitative. The nationalists fought conventional battles, while the communists waged guerrilla war from rural bases. This uneasy alliance was fraught with distrust and frequent clashes. Both sides knew the real struggle for power would resume after the war. China was fighting a war within a war. The Japanese invasion forced unity, but the civil conflict simmered beneath the surface. Survival depended on endurance and resilience. For years, China fought alone, cut off from the world. The Burma Road became its lifeline for supplies. In 1941, American volunteers, the Flying Tigers, arrived, bringing hope to the skies. Their shark-faced planes and daring tactics inspired a battered nation. The Flying Tigers' success forged a bond between China and the US. Everything changed after Pearl Harbor. America joined the war, and China gained a powerful ally. US aid and advisors poured in, keeping China in the fight. The Burma Road became a vital artery for survival. China's lonely struggle was now part of a global war. The tide was slowly turning. From 1938, the war in China became a brutal stalemate. Japan held the cities, but the countryside resisted. Chiang Kai-shek's strategy traded space for time, drawing Japan deeper into a quagmire. Battles like Taiyuan and Wuhan showed China's resolve, but at a terrible cost. Soldiers fought with outdated weapons, often starving and sick. Civilians faced famine, displacement, and constant fear. Guerrilla fighters and underground networks kept resistance alive. Makeshift universities continued to educate, even in caves. Despite unimaginable hardship, China endured. Japan was trapped in a war it could not win or escape. The war of attrition was bleeding both nations dry. By 1945, Japan was collapsing under the immense pressure of a prolonged and devastating war. The nation was on the brink of defeat, with its cities in ruins and its people exhausted from years of relentless conflict. US bombers devastated Japanese cities with relentless aerial assaults, while the Soviets launched a powerful invasion into Manchuria, further crippling Japan's ability to continue the war. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were catastrophic, forcing Japan's surrender and bringing an abrupt end to the war in the Pacific. After 8 long and grueling years, China's war was finally over, bringing a sense of relief and celebration to a war-weary nation. The cost was staggering. 20 million dead, millions more displaced, and a nation left in ruins, struggling to rebuild from the ashes of destruction. China gained a significant seat at the newly formed United Nations, a recognition of its immense sacrifice and contribution to the war effort. However, this peace was fleeting and fragile. The fragile alliance between the nationalists and communists, which had held during the war, quickly shattered under the weight of political tensions. Civil war resumed almost immediately, plunging the nation back into chaos and conflict as the two factions vied for control. The nationalists, weakened by years of war and internal strife, steadily lost ground to their more organized and determined opponents. The communists, strengthened by their crucial wartime role and popular support, emerged victorious, gaining control over vast territories. In 1949, Mao Zedong triumphantly declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China, marking a new era in Chinese history. The end of the war marked not only the birth of a new nation, but also the beginning of a new chapter in China's long and storied history. The Second Sino-Japanese War forged modern China through unimaginable suffering and resilience. Its legacy is a fierce commitment to sovereignty and unity. The trauma of invasion and division drives China's policies to this day. The war paved the way for communist rule and a new national identity. China's story is one of survival against all odds. The lesson: never again allow weakness or division. The war's true legacy is the unbreakable will of its people. It is a story the world must remember.